If your newsletter is only working when you're working, you might have accidentally built yourself a second job. And so, what I'm going to do is show you exactly how to identify where the problem is and then how to swap it out pretty easily. All right. And this is without rebuilding everything, without creating more content, and obviously not switching to a paid newsletter. So, I know all this stuff because I've been building these things since 2011. And literally everything I'm going to show you comes from fixing that exact problem. So, this is how your newsletter can feel off. If you're saying this stuff to yourself, or you're experiencing this, like, I need to be more consistent, I need to tighten my voice and storytelling, I should post more so it's not losing momentum. Once it's bigger, I can start earning and it's going to feel more solid or real. And there's a couple others, but those are really the big ones. All right. So there's a 3-step newsletter dependency diagnostic that I'm going to take you through here. So the first one is you want to mentally separate your newsletter from you. So if your newsletter needs your opinions, your stories, or if you feel like you need to be there to keep the quality high, you've accidentally, even if you're not the face of it, okay, built a personal brand. And so this one is really, really sneaky. And like I said, even if you are not the face of this, if any of these problems feel familiar, like I should probably review this one more time, or it doesn't sound just right, or no one else is going to be able to do this the right way, that kind of stuff, that's the trap right there, because it means your newsletter absolutely totally depends on you being there. And this is going to prevent you from getting on top of the chaos, outsourcing or using AI to the fullest extent. So you get stuck in these endless rewrites. You can't step away without worrying, and you're not going to be able to grow this thing, because what ends up happening is you become the bottleneck in literally every single case. All right. So if the system needs your taste to function, it's going to need you forever. All right. So the second one is you want to be able to remove the weekly performance pressure. So if missing a week gives you anxiety, system's already broken. All right. That one's pretty self-explanatory. Now, the third one, this one seems to be difficult for a lot of folks, but monetization absolutely cannot be value first dependent. Now, what do I mean by that? So if the money only comes after people know, like, and trust you, or after you get bigger, meaning you reach a certain size where, oh, now I can start earning money. All right, you've accidentally built a creator model on that. So this is how to save yourself months. So instead of asking questions like, why isn't this making money? Why does this feel like I'm starting over every month? Why does this take so much effort? I want you to shift that just a little bit and ask, what breaks if I stop paying attention? And that question matters, and it's because the second reasons newsletters crash. And that is when people try to fix the first problem, they tend to misdiagnose it and they end up making it worse. Okay, because almost everybody assumes that in order to get out from under it or to make it work, they have to do more and be more in the space for it to happen. The reality is the exact opposite. You absolutely need to do less. All right, so there's a bit of good news here. If any of that made sense to you, you don't need to flush it all and start over. We're just going to make some micro adjustments. Okay, so this is how you swap out all of this stuff and actually make it work. And the first part is day one revenue. So again, if money's only showing up after people are trusting your voice, they've been reading you for a certain length of time or consistently, or they're sticking around long enough, okay, all you have to do is just how you're earning revenue from day one. And that can be a ton of different things. It could be print on demand, it could be e-commerce, it could be info products. It's up to you with the model and the market that you've chosen. And again, I'm not talking about switching this to a paid newsletter. Now, the second one is, who is your newsletter for? So the growth of the monetization can absolutely blow up once you're talking to who I call empowered buyers. And these aren't people who are just sort of loosely curious about your topic. All right, they've already spent money, they're using tools, they're following stuff in the space, they want it to work better. Okay, they basically, part of their identity is in the purchase or consumption of whatever it is that you're talking about. So I'll give you some examples here. Technology, AI, this would be people who are already buying devices, software subscriptions, and tools. They're probably using them in their business or in their personal lives. All right. So then you have health, fitness, muscle. They're already in the gym. They're buying supplements. They're tracking process. They identify as, say, a runner, or as a weightlifter, or as a fitness model, or someone like that. Then we have the personal finance and investing. These are people who are already investing. They're already paying for tools, education, services, that kind of stuff. Entrepreneurship, creator economy. They've built something. Maybe it isn't going the way they want yet. That's fine. But at least they've built something and they're spending money on tools, traffic, or education. All right. So the one thing unifying all these is that they're absolutely not newbies. Now, if you did build your newsletter around people who are new, just getting started, or if they're curious, it's it totally can work. Absolutely. People do it all the time. But here's what it means. It means your revenue can be slower, your messaging is going to be shifting a lot more, and you're going to have to explain a lot more things. And so the big reason for that is because the who you're speaking to is going to change. And I'm going to show you, I call it newbie shift. And this is what it looks like. So let's say in the health and fitness space, somebody who wants to lose maybe 55 pounds or something. So their experience with it is that back in college, and let's say this person's an adult, they went to the gym with friends. So it's kind of a light experience. Well, most commonly, and you can get this information from any gym owner that's willing to have the conversation, most people end up quitting in the first 30 to 90 days. That's why when you look at people, especially the first of the year with New Year's resolutions, it just goes crazy. All right. And then what another thing that they do is they're going to jump from program to program. So maybe they start off at a gym, maybe they go to CrossFit, maybe they do Orange Theory, maybe they start doing walks at work. And after a while, maybe it just sort of burbles into YouTube at home and then it kind of goes away. What that means is they're not just jumping from program to program, they're literally shifting the identity that they have. All right. And so the takeaway from that is if your newsletter feels like you have to work on it, you have to constantly create content, you aren't sure what to say, feels like you're starting over, and if you're waiting to earn revenue, it's usually one of those two elements that we talked about. So the day one revenue model, and are you speaking to empowered buyers, right? So when you build your newsletter with a revenue first model while speaking to these empowered buyers, this is literally the difference between having a newsletter that's going to feel like a second job and one that earns, doesn't need you constantly, and actually behaves like a real revenue producing asset. Hopefully this helped. All right. See you in the next one.